أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجان من مارج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان وله الجوار المنشآت في البحر كالأعلام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان صدق الله العظيم.
MashaAllah. Jazakallah Hafiz Mahmoud Hamid. Inshallah, we're going to have a Naat from a local talent, young talent, MashaAllah, Sayyid Abu Zar Shah Sahab, to come forward and do a Naat, Inshallah. Bismillah.
Sallallahu alayka ya Rasulullah wa sallam alayka ya Habiballah.
Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Tu shah-e khubaan, tu jane jana, tu shah-e khubaan, tu jane jana hai chehra ummul kitab tera hai chehra ummul kitab tera na ban سکی ہے نہ بن سکے گا نہ بن سکی ہے نہ بن سکے گا مثال تیری جواب تیرا مثال تیری جواب تیرا تو سب سے اول تو سب سے آخر تو سب سے اول تو سب سے آخر ملا ہے حسن دوام تجھ کو ملا ہے حسن دوام تجھ کو ہے عمر لاکھوں برس کی تیری ہے عمر لاکھوں برس کی تیری مگر ہے تازہ شباب تیرا مگر ہے تازہ شباب تیرا نہ بن سکی ہے نہ بن سکے گا نہ بن سکی ہے نہ بن سکے گا مثال تیری جواب تیرا ہے تو بھی صاحب हिरासा के रोज़े महशर से है हिरासा अरे तू जिनकी है नात पढ़ता अरे तू जिनकी है नात पढ़ता वही तो लेंगे हिसाब तेरा तू शाह खूबा तू जाने जाना तू शाह खूबा तू जाने जाना है चेहरा उम्मुल किताब तेरा.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair. That was Sayyid Abu Zar Shah Sahab, MashaAllah. Just thought I'd introduce the panel, inshallah. Alongside me we've got Ustaz Ahmed Alim, MashaAllah. A local fella, MashaAllah. Contributing member of society, inshallah. He's very good with his technology, MashaAllah.
Ahmed, do you do some vlogging or something as well?
It actually took start in 2017. I created a YouTube channel and like I mentioned yesterday, I went to Hajj in 2017 and I took that moment to record everything, record the memories as they were created, and it wasn't, to be honest, it wasn't something to show the world. It was more about creating the memory for me to look upon, look back onto. So
it's more of a hobby than of yours, isn't it?
Yeah, he's got quite a few views. He's been a bit humble there. He's done how many views is it?
So I think the channel views has 100,000 views, 100k.
The channel or the videos?
The channel altogether contributed. Some has more, some have less. But
MashaAllah. Where else have you been for your vlogs? You
went to Palestine. So
what's first
2018.
Why don't we use this platform to share that? What's the channel called? What's going on?
So it here. The channel name actually.
Remember, there's no red tape on this podcast.
It's not anything religious based. It's just a general nickname I've gave it. Amenzo, AMENZO, I think, or
sure.
1Z.
Is that going to be in the description or no?
No, I hope not.
No official.
No,
just a camera.
No, but I got myself into cinematography and recording with the aesthetic kind of vibe to it, make it look pleasing to look at for the viewers. And
so viewers, inshallah, will be I think we'll be benefiting from most of his technological background.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
So the next on the panel, if you want to introduce, we've got Mr. Umar Ihsan, MashaAllah.
Umar Ihsan.
Student of architecture, I believe. Yeah, MashaAllah.
At university, yeah?
Yeah, he's a regular student at ours as well at Central Mosque. Weekend course, he's your student as well there, MashaAllah. So, MashaAllah.
So we'll be hearing from him.
Yeah.
Inshallah. And to my left, probably your right on the screen, is Shah's Abu Zar Shah Sahab. So we had his elder brother a few days back,
Moeed Shah,
and now we have Abu Zar, and hopefully inshallah we can bring the two together as well. Yeah. But it's beautiful to hear Naat. I particularly enjoy listening to Naat from the family of the Prophet. I mean, the way when I describe my father, I become emotional, and you have that sentiment that comes with that.
Definitely.
Yeah, because it's blood relation. And when somebody from the family, the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ describes his grandfather, you can imagine the emotion they experienced. We could never get close to that emotion that they would experience. From us, it's like an exterior, outsider type of description or experience we try to engage in. But subhanallah, Allah Ta'ala bless the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Ameen, MashaAllah. So, what's the script for today?
Now you could meet. What's the script today?
What's the script?
Allah. Okay, let's start with Surah Rahmaan that we recited.
Subhanallah. Wow.
Surah Rahmaan, Urusul Quran.
Subhanallah.
The bride of the Quran, i.e. the beauty of the Quran is in Surah Ar-Rahman. How many times is it repeated?
31 times, I believe.
31 times.
Yes. There's a great significance. There's a book called Asrar al-Takrar fil Quran by Imam Jalaluddin as-Suyuti. It's about that thick.
Okay.
And he goes through every single word that's oft repeated, and he links them all. And there's a clear link. We've got, for example, in Surah Mursalat, Wailun yawma idil mukaththibin, repeats itself quite a few times. And there's a clear link between the two. Allah's talking about those people who deny his fadl upon us and his karam upon us. He says, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. which of those favors will you deny? Should you deny? Wailun yawma idil mukaththibin. Then woe and curse be to those people who deny it.
So he's made that link between the two surahs, then, hasn't he?
Yeah. And the two surahs are heavily linked. Surah Rahman is linked with almost every single surah in the Quran. That's why it's the bride of the Quran. I know the link comes to mind. For example, Allah says, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. So Allah is talking about those people who have the fear of Allah and His status amongst us, His maqam amongst us, and they control themselves from their desires. For them, Jannah is their resting place, is their abode. And then Allah elaborates about this Jannah. It's actually not just one Jannah for those people. وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ. It's actually two Jannahs. And then Allah goes on to describe these two Jannahs, and the way He does it linguistically, the way I see it in my mind, it's in 4 circles.
Okay.
It works in 4 circles.
All right, share it with us.
So you've got the 4 big circles, the 2 big circles, I mean. وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ. So Allah talks about, on a grand level, you've got these flowing rivers. عَيْنَانِ تَجْرِيَانِ.
Yep.
Yeah, you've got fruits, for example, فَاكِهَةٌ. Not just فَاكِهَةٌ, I mean all fruits. فِيهِمَا مِنْ كُلِّ فَاكِهَةٍ زَوْجَانِ. All this variety in the 2 big heavens.
Okay.
And then for the people who fear Allah to a lesser level, maybe not as high as that, there is 2 smaller Jannahs within that. وَمِن دُونِهِمَا جَنَّتَانِ. And within there, things are a bit smaller. So it's not flowing streams, it's عَيْنَانِ نَضَّاخَتَانِ. Small little streams, not rivers. It's not every single fruit. It's فَاكِهَةٌ وَنَخْلٌ وَرُمَّانِ, limited amount, like that. So there's this beautiful sort of diagram Allah is portraying in Surah Al-Rahman.
But it's for those. Okay, you carry on. I've got something coming in mind.
It ties the entire Quran as well. If we look at the Quran as a map, we got right at the beginning, we've got the Alif Lam, we've got Alif Lam Mim, we've got Alif Lam Mim Sad, we've got Alif Lam Mim Ra.
Yep.
We've got Alif Lam Ra, many of them in fact. And so if you progress through the Quran and you come across Hamims, you've got Hamim, Ain Sin Qaf, etc.
The Hawamim.
Yep, the Hawamims. MashaAllah. And then you come right to the end, you've got the Noon. And when you add all these together, Alif Lam Ra Hamim Noon,
makes Ar-Rahman.
Ar-Rahman, Allama al-Quran.
Subhanallah. Yep.
So it ties, it's the bride of the entire Quran, everything's tied into it. Look how Allah is introducing Himself. Ar-Rahman. What's the ultimate mercy of Allah? Like if we go from a linguistic point of view, if you've mentioned, I am the most strongest, for example.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to mention something about my strength. I want to show that I'm the strongest. Or I've beat X person in a battle. Or X, Y, Z. I've lifted X amount. So when Allah says He's the most merciful, it's only befitting from a linguistic point of view that He mentions then what's one of His biggest mercies upon us.
Yep. What is it then?
Allama al-Quran.
Subhanallah.
The Quran.
He taught the Quran.
He taught us the Quran.
But within that, again, speaking of linguistic then, Allama yu'allimu ta'liman is from the Afal al-Qulub.
Yeah.
It demands a second subject. We've only got one here. Object, yeah?
Yeah.
So the maf'ul, so allama al-Quran, allama is fi'l and fa'il.
Yeah.
Quran is a maf'ul.
It's a maf'ul thani.
But it requires another maf'ul, doesn't it?
Maf'ul.
Who is a maf'ul thani?
Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu
Prophet
alaihi wasallam.
sallallahu
Allamahu al-Quran.
Allamahu al-Quran. It is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He taught the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the Quran. And what is the Quran? وَلَا رَطْبٍ وَلَا يَابِسٍ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مُبِينٍ. There's no wet, there's no dry. Nothing that is between the heavens and the earth that isn't within the knowledge of the Quran. And then Allah says, وَعَلَّمَكَ مَا لَمْ تَكُنْ تَعْلَمُ. We taught you whatever you had not known before. And then we taught you the Quran and everything within the Quran. This is why we as Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah can confidently say that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has knowledge of all.
Subhanallah. Because the Quran has knowledge of all.
The Quran.
Therefore, lazim malzoom.
Yeah.
He has to have knowledge of all.
He has to have knowledge of all.
Subhanallah.
And he's not he's not self-taught, is he?
No.
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's directly through from Allah, isn't it? Where all this teaching comes.
وَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَعَلَّمَكَ مَا لَمْ تَكُنْ تَعْلَمُ. So Allah Himself is saying that He taught him.
Yeah, so that's the point of Aqidah. But just on that point, not to forget, when we say he has knowledge of all, that means whatever knowledge Allah has given him.
Yes.
It's not his personal knowledge he's gained or a knowledge that's separate from Allah upon his own accord or anything like that. It's from Allah.
Even those who debate it, they quote an ayah from Surah Maida, or Surah An'am, I mean,
Hmm.
that وَعِنْدَهُ مَفَاتِحُ الْغَيْبِ,
Yep.
that Allah has the keys of the unseen. لَا يَعْلَمُهَا إِلَّا هُ, that only He knows about these. And these people think that this is an evidence to say that only Allah has this knowledge and nobody else alone. What they're lacking is a methodology. The primary method of tafsir is Al-Quran yufassiru ba'duhu ba'da,
About the Quran, yep.
that the Quran explains it. So if we look in the Quran, we need to look, where does Allah explain the ilm al-ghaib? And we go to Surah Al-Jinn.
Hmm.
عالم الغيب والشهادة عالم الغيب فلا يظهر على غيبه أحدا, that Allah is the knower of the unseen. He doesn't make the unseen apparent to anybody.
Illa,
إلا من ارتضى من رسول,
Subhanallah.
except whoever He is pleased with. And what are the names?
and whom is He most pleased with in the universe? He's the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
That's one of their names. Al-Mustafa, Al-Murtada, Al-Mujtaba, sallallahu
Sallallahu
alayhi
alayhi
wa
wa
From the names of.
So this is a point on Aqidah. Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah Afzal for elaborating on that. Ji Mahmood, we've got a question from the live audience.
He's asked a question. I mentioned the word methodology. What does that mean?
What's the Quranic methodology? Maybe
The
elaborate. on
Quranic methodology, subhanAllah, there is a Quranic methodology. The Quran teaches methodology right from the get-go.
that. Hmm.
It's something we mentioned on the weekend class, remember? The Quran begins how? Alif, Lam, Mim.
Hmm.
At the manhaj, this is manhaj. When you approach something, you have to approach it Alif, Lam and Mim. Meaning you have to break everything down to its core values. Everything down, strip it down. If you're presented with a word, you strip it down. If you're presented
Right
with
to
a
the
fi'l,
bone, as they say, yeah?
you need to give the sigha. You
Hmm.
can't just give the sigha, you need to give huruf asliya. You need to strip everything down. That's Quranic methodology. But what I was referring to there is we always invite people to approach the Quran,
Yep.
read translation, engage with it. But at the end of the day, there is aspects of Quranic study, what we call hermeneutics is the word. It's a very fancy word, exegesis, tafsir, etc., which has a methodology. You can only traverse this path the way the ulama have done so. The Quran is such a book that not anybody can come and say what he wants about it. There's a methodology.
This is why, scholars are traditionally trained right in a particular way, isn't it? From the beginner sciences, then they move on to usul tafsir, and then finally towards the latter years of their studies, they do Quran, and then right to the end it's hadith, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they are put through that process, so that their knowledge is refined as it was for the previous generations.
Yeah, actually, that's the Dars Nizami syllabus actually reflects usul al-tafsir.
It does, of course.
Usul full stop, because usul, probably I would say 75% of it is just language. So that's why you see 75% of the Dars Nizami is just lugha.
Yeah, it is.
Then the last 25%, so to speak, is the actual context of the religion, i.e. the Quran, Asbab al-Nuzul, Hadith, etc.
Stuff like that is just like basic. It's a read, isn't it?
Yeah.
You read over it once, you'll understand it.
That's it.
But the usul are the core, which is binding everything together. And like you mentioned, if you pick a book like Nur al-Anwar, the big chunk of it is just on huruf. How are huruf being used in the Quran and in the books of fiqh? I mean, fi, ala, min, all of these, how are being used?
Yeah.
And the several meanings that they have. So it is.
Yeah.
And somebody that's not traditional, that's trained in this traditional methodology, they are the people that are making mistakes.
Definitely.
And when they go online, they may have a big following online because of their charisma and their presentation skills, maybe unique, and they do pull a crowd and they get views. But in reality, what they lack is that core understanding.
Yeah.
And when they slip up, they slip hard.
That's
It's like the hadith says, towards the day of judgment, there will come ulama, ضَلُّوا وَأَضَلُّوا. They are misguided themselves, وَأَضَلُّوا, and they will misguide hundreds of thousands. And that's what shaitan wanted, didn't he? Shaitan would rather misguide an alim than misguide a community. Because by taking one alim onto the wrong path, that alim is now going to guide an entire community in the wrong direction. It's a powerful position to be in, and it demands a lot.
Yeah, that's why you need that manhaj, that methodology, isn't it? Without methodology, it's a free-for-all. The religion's open to anybody. That's why the ulama have laid down the manhaj. You can only approach it for a certain way. But that being said, there are definitely huge portions of the Quran which are accessible to the youth, accessible to people in the translation of Quran. But there are definitely some areas that lay people, students like ourselves, we should always refer back to our teachers and say, this part, how do I approach it as well? So yeah, that's.
I think we've
methodology.
taken a difficult start to the podcast.
Definitely.
Might get a bit boring for people.
Content heavy straight away.
Yeah.
So me and Hafiz are enjoying this intellectual discussion we're having here, yeah, but thinking of the rest, they're like, well, what's going on here, man? They don't have a say in this.
It's
Yeah.
what people are asking for.
Huh?
It's what the audience needs.
Do they really? See, these type of discussions we would have in a dars,
Yes.
when you have a focused group who's come to absorb all of that understanding. See, this type of content, you throw it online, nobody's really going to understand it.
They're not going to take away anything.
Anything other than a few moments of excitement, yeah? What's it called? Imam Ghazali describes it in a beautiful way. Intellectual... that's a term used,
Yeah.
yeah?
Right.
So...
It's entertainment, innit?
Yeah, so intellectual entertainment, something like that. And it's a lot of students of Deen are studying Deen just for that. See, when you study knowledge, what is the core? And I teach this to all my students, and I keep bringing back to the same thing. Why are we studying this knowledge? What's the maqsad? And the one and only intention should be for Allah, to get close to Allah. So what happens is you start with good intentions. You started a course, then after a few weeks, after a few months, when your family members, cousins, friends find out you've been coming to this weekend class, and now they start asking you questions about Deen, their fiqh questions, and now you think, you know what, I know my stuff now. MashaAllah. Yeah, and then he starts giving out answers. And when he starts giving out answers, those answers could be right, but could be wrong. But when he's given that answer without that confidence, without having checked his sources, you know, the hadith describes that Allah and all the malaika curse that individual who gives a verdict without having sound knowledge. Yeah, without sound knowledge. And how many of us, I mean, the viewers, for example, just because you've got a good following on Instagram and you're always, you know, putting snaps of yourself and being in a class, or I've seen also, you guys can tell me, God forbid, if anybody of us is like this. So when they have their books open and they're revising, got to take a snap.
Yeah.
Got to upload it. And not everyone's looking online. Oh, mashallah, bro. So many books. So much knowledge.
For the gram.
Yeah.
One for the gram.
Yeah.
That's what they say.
What's it called?
One for the gram.
For the gram.
One
innit?
for the gram.
Instagram.
Okay, I'm new to this, man. I don't have all of this. I don't have
This
this
part's
stuff.
for Allah, this part's for the gram.
Oh, this part for Allah is for
But
the
the
gram.
Quran actually commands us, doesn't it? It says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders us, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. You know,
So
whatever you don't have knowledge about, don't go there.
Yeah.
You know, it's a Quran, you know, imperative from Allah.
And at the same time, it says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ. Seek guidance and ask from those people that actually do know their stuff. Dhikr means, the Sufi translation of this would be people of dhikr, yeah?
Subhanallah.
But the ulama would describe it people of understanding. Dhikr means understanding. Those that constant, or those that have their knowledge is fresh. Now dhikr means what? Remembrance, isn't it?
Yeah.
They have focus and they revise everything over. So I was saying, so take these snaps and everything, and they get, and we were talking about the fitna yesterday, weren't we? For last few days of university and fitnas like this. And this is one of those fitnas. Just because a brother's posting a few pictures of himself revising or being in a class, you'll get so many of the opposite gender now asking questions.
Oh, mashallah.
And it always starts like, sister, I've got this one question, fiqh question. And then that sister will respond. Then our sister got one more question. And then after a few more questions, now it becomes casual. Sister, how are you?
Oh,
Yeah, alhamdulillah, jazakallah, brother, jazakallah. Few days go by and then it becomes, okay, how are you feeling today? You're feeling good. What have you had today? That's what have you had today. Where have you been today? Where have you been today? And then before you know, okay, where do you want to go today? And then they start going somewhere as well.
Yes, salam.
And then what do you want to do today? La hawla wa quwwata illa billah.
Yes, salam alaikum.
And that's, I'm telling you, so many students of knowledge fall victim to this. And majority of it is happening over social media. So many. I've just given an example of a sister, yeah? Brothers likewise. You'll get you get imams now. Several cases we've heard in the previous few years. Imams have been asked questions, and then those then become casual, and before you know it, so much is taking place. Where, I mean, we were mentioning the ayah, وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ. One who fears Allah truly. Yeah? For him there are two paradises. Now I'll ask yourself and others to elaborate on this. What does it mean by khawf? What is fearing Allah?
Allah does tafsir of it anyway. It's not just وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ. It's وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى. It's to control yourself. That's what it is.
Nahan nafs. Powerful words.
That's it.
You've got to stop yourself. Yourself.
To elaborate on your point, the one that you were making, I think it's a side effect, with instigating conversations between people online. It all comes as a side effect. I think when the person is posting themselves or bragging to the world, look, I'm doing this, look, I'm doing that, I'm there, I'm here. It's I think it's to blame is social media. Like in social media, you have this standard now that everyone's living this luxurious life, everyone's doing X amount of work, everyone's going to that place. It's these standards, and they're not true. You'll see people, they're living such a happy life on social media, and
it's a false perception, and they're giving off
exactly, and it's not. They have that feeling that it's almost like necessary for them to do what other person is doing to fit in, but that's not the reality, and it's a sign, I guess. It's a sign.
Allah.
But is it social media's fault or is it an individual fault?
I mean, social media is giving you the door. It's opened the doorway in it. When it comes to things like that, Allah commands us, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا. Don't even go there.
لا تقربوا
Don't
الزنا.
even go there. Do you know what I mean? So
I mean, anything that leads towards a zina is part and parcel of zina, isn't it? Yeah. If and ulama do describe, you don't physically have to do the zina with the private parts. And the hadith describes zina al-aini an-nadhr. The zina of the eyes is to view haram
Plans,
content. Yeah. Zina al-yadi al-mas. The zina of the hands is to touch, and whether it be touching haram, the opposite gender, whatever it may be. And similarly, all these limbs, they do commit zina in that sense.
Speech, most common one.
Yeah, most common one.
mashallah.
Okay, so going back to the question, what is khawf? Where does khawf play a part in, let's say, you're on your own, social media. We're not talking about adult content now for today. We had that discussion yesterday. I don't want anyone to be thinking of that. But the fitna of social media, for example.
Khawf rarely comes to play in the ghaib.
When you're on your own.
When you're on your own. That's where real khawf is. Other than that, it's a show.
You reckon?
Yeah, other than that, I think most demonstrations of khawf are literally show. So sometimes not with bad intention. But real khawf comes, مَنْ يَخَافُ رَبَّهُ بِالْغَيْبِ إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُم بِالْغَيْبِ.
We mentioned this yesterday as well.
We did actually.
After mentioning that, on Jummah, I read these ayat as well in Jummah.
So this is sort of a preparation for Jummah.
يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُم بِالْغَيْبِ. They fear their Lord when they're on their own, in the absence of the people of the community.
Yeah.
Talk about social media. I actually read this one thing on Instagram. Kind of relates to this. It said the Japanese, they have this saying: a person has 3 personas of themselves. One that they show to the world.
Okay.
One that they show to their close friends, family, how they see you, and one that they show to only themselves, no one else.
No one else knows.
So when you're alone, how do you portray yourself? Is it different to how you portray yourself to your family, to the public?
See, that's what the ulama describe as nifaq fil amal. Yeah, it's the hypocrisy in your amal, isn't it? So in public, I speak for myself. On a Jummah, I could be sat on the pulpit, Imam Sharif on, Jubba, Kuba, everything done. But like Ahmed was mentioning, true khawf only displays when you're on your own.
On your own.
Yeah, and Sayyidi Osman bin Ali Hujwairi, famously known as Data Sahib Ali Rahma from Lahore. See, I live like a
Stone's throw
away from Data Sahib. And in Kashmir Masjid, he describes that if you really want to test your faith, your iman, then ask yourself what's your conduct when you're on your own.
Isn't it
that's when you'll truly know where you stand with your Lord.
Isn't it the awliya Allah, one of their specific qualities was that their khalwa and their jalwa was the same.
Yeah.
Meaning they were just as God conscious and self-controlling in their khalwa as much outside.
Yes.
In
They
the
didn't need to they didn't have to go out of their way to put on a figure, an image, just for public.
Yeah.
Whatever they were in public, they were on their own as well when they were in privacy. And coming back to that question, khawf. There are levels of khawf,
Okay.
and as like we mentioned in the previous days as well, with roles come responsibilities.
Okay.
Yeah, this is why particular aima, those that are leading in the community, they have a high responsibility, and their outward display of faith must be on point. They can't be seen slipping up. But we have seen imams, we've seen religious figures slip up on social media, as we've mentioned as well. And when that happens, the backlash they get and the defamation that Islam as a whole, imams as a community we face,
It's drastic.
is drastic.
Yeah.
I mean, it becomes difficult for imams to go out and preach,
Yeah,
Domino
because
effect.
you're all
Yeah.
coloured in the same brushes, aren't you?
Even from a fiqh point of view, isn't it that, and you can't pray behind the imam who you've lost that respect for.
Yeah, yeah.
So it has drastic, consequences. Once your congregation loses respect for you, you're religiously obliged to resign. There's nothing you can do now
Yeah,
until it's forgotten.
And when other imams, they go out in the community, they label the same.
Yeah.
Like, you must be like one of that one as well.
One of those.
You probably do the same thing as X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
But when that's not the case, but for the layman and imams, everyone experiences this. Yeah, when you're on your own, that's when shaitan gets you the most, doesn't it? And how do you keep yourself away from the temptation of shaitan when you're on your own?
It's a tough one. That's what taqwa is.
Go on, define taqwa, then let's go.
That's what taqwa. Well, believe it or not, my Jummah speech was on defining taqwa today.
Today, okay.
But it was only from a Quranic point of view. Meaning Allah many a times commands us to taqwa, ittaqullah, and then He follows it by some definitions of taqwa.
There are several
So
given.
what
yeah.
I did was I compiled that in the Jummah khutbah. So for example, Allah says, ittaqullah wa kunu ma'a sadiqeen.
Okay.
So have taqwa of Allah, whether that's fear or consciousness, you decide, but being in righteous company. So that's part of taqwa now. Ittaqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. To speak nicely then. And likewise Allah says, ittaqullah wal tanzur nafsun ma qaddamat lighad. And so taqwa is got so many aspects to it. But from a linguistic point of view, taqwa actually has the same meaning of siyam.
Yep.
Imsak, fasting, to stay away from something.
To refrain.
To refrain. Ittaqil ma'asi, for example. So that means stay away from sin. Very famous poem of Imam al-Shafi'i. He once was affected in his memory. He started forgetting things. And so he went to his teacher, who's none other than the great Imam Waqi' ibn al-Jarrah. He's buried in Egypt, close by to him. And he complains to him and he says, my memory's gone weak. And he says to him, ittaqil ma'asi. Stay away from sin. And many years later, Imam al-Shafi'i recalls this in a very famous poem. He says, شكوت إلى وكيع سوء حفظي فأرشدني إلى ترك المعاصي وأخبرني بأن العلم نور ونور الله لا يهدى للعاصي. That he said, I complained to Waqi' about the badness of my memory. And he guided me towards leaving sin. And he told me that the knowledge of Allah is a light of Allah.
It's a light.
And the light of Allah is not given to a sinner. So part of taqwa is staying away from sin, is what I would say.
But the question is, how would you stay away from sin?
Go on,
In that secrecy.
some practical.
Yeah.
I mean, you've
We've
got to be
give
more
somebody-
specific though. You got to give a sin.
Well,
and then
I've got a viewpoint on this actually.
Go on.
But I read Allama Iqbal's quote,
So,
Muhammad
okay.
Iqbal, famous poet. He said, the person who has no control over his process of thinking is likely to be ruined by the liberty of thought.
By the?
And liberty of thought,
definitely.
the freedom of
Okay. Yeah,
his own
yeah.
I
mind.
mean, don't they say that an idle mind is the devil's workshop?
Yep.
Like if your mind's just sat there, you no control. Shaitan's gonna come and he's gonna get to work in there, isn't it?
Yeah, this is why a lot of the counselling given to, let's say, people that have addiction to sin, whichever sin it may be. One of the counselling given is that keep yourself away from that company, keep yourself busy. And if an individual is committing sin using his phone or social media, whatever it is, then keep himself busy.
Yeah.
In community, keep yourself in the community eye. If you know, and you need to be honest and genuine in your relationship with your Lord. Ask yourself, what is the source of this sin? If it's a device, then leave that device with your parents. If it's the Wi-Fi, if it's the net, then turn it off. Yeah, don't use your mobile in the evenings if you know that's the reason. If you know that particular friends which ignite that desire for sin, and by being in their company, you know for sure you're gonna indulge in that sin. Leave that company then.
Wait, this links to Taubah, doesn't it? That's what we're talking about. How do we make Taubah from sin?
Okay.
And I believe it's Imam al-Ghazali who lays it down like this. I call it the 3 R's. The letter
three
R's,
Rs,
yeah. Meaning, Taubah it's got 3 parts to it and 1 condition to it. MashaAllah, takrar there. 3 parts, 1 condition. So you got number 1 is to feel remorse and nadama, for example.
Yeah.
You could do Taubah from a sin and say astaghfirullah day and night, but if you don't recognize it to be bad, then that Taubah then is fake, isn't it? So we've got to feel it first. Then comes the actual repent part. So now asking Allah, oh Allah, forgive me. Recognizing that you've wronged in your relationship between you and Allah, and you should seek His forgiveness. And the last part is refrain now. Now you've got to take active measures to stay away from it. So like you said, if you know it's the phone at a certain time, then make sure you put it away. If it's walking down a certain street, then make sure you walk on another street. So when these 3 parts are done, then there's one condition for Tawbah, is that you have to believe Allah's forgiven you with good certainty.
Yeah.
You know, Sayyidina Umar, I think, is very famously, he said that, you know, he knows Allah has forgiven him. I know Allah has forgiven me. People said, how? He said, if Allah has given me the ability to seek forgiveness from me, He's already forgiven me.
Yeah.
ثُمَّ تَابَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمْ لِيَتُوبُوا. Allah turns to you so you can make Tawbah.
Yeah.
So if you're making Tawbah, if you feel that remorse, Allah's actually already turned to you. It's a matter of you waking up.
Yeah, Sayyida Aisha radiallahu anha has famously mentioned an-nadmu huwa tawbatu. To feel that remorse, to feel that guilt in your heart, to even to start feel bad that I have committed that sin. You're already 70% there. You're already there. The tawbah's already started. Now the only thing left is for you to formally accept that mistake and then become steadfast on not doing that sin again. Yeah. So after you mentioned 3 points, if you even boil it down to even 2, this is the guilt and then not to do it again.
Not to do it again.
Even that is sufficient for your Lord to know, because in between, you know, like the hadith describes that between one Friday to the second Friday, the sins are being forgiven. From one Ramadan to the next Ramadan, sins are being forgiven. And ulama describe in the month of Ramadan, because we're here now, they say that by fasting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remove your major sins. And by doing qiyam during the nights, Allah through the barakah of that will remove all your minor sins. Yeah. And when you come to the night of Eid, the last night of Ramadan, that is the night where this one portion of hadith I've mentioned in Jummah, I missed the second part out due to lack of time. You know, every evening, at iftar, hadith describes that 70,000 people are being freed from the fire of Jahannam, upon whom Jahannam was wajib. Every night, every evening at iftar time. And then the hadith says that if you accumulate all those 70,000 for the entire month times by 30, how much is that?
70,000 times by 30.
Yeah.
That's 2,100,000.
2,100,000. Hadith describes, thank you. Hadith describes that's how many people are freed from the fire on that one night alone.
One night, subhanallah.
One night alone. And if you're sincere in your relationship with your Lord, and I've mentioned this word so many times, sincerity and genuineness, I keep saying it. There's a reason for it. Because Imam al-Ghazali, for his, you know, Ayyuhal Walad, which is his message to the student.
To student.
And in the final chapter, he describes that after all of my reading and all of my research and my travels, his conclusion is that the entire deen is established upon sincerity.
Mukhliseen lahu ad-deen.
Mukhliseen, and for the mukhliseen, those that are honest, for them they truly have attained deen. Religiousness, religiosities, if that's a word.
You should always carry on doing good deeds. Yeah. You know, always follow your bad deeds by good deeds. Isn't that a prophetic advice as well?
But seek sincerity.
Yeah, sincerity.
You'd rather do less, but with sincerity, which is accepting the court of Allah, than do abundant, which are rejected altogether.
Just to add to your stats, I think the hadith further goes on to mention on the day of Friday, on the day of Jummah, it's double.
Yeah, it's double.
It's double. So, you know, consider that 4 or 3 or 5 Fridays in Ramadan, 4 or 5.
Yeah. So add all those numbers in. Yeah, Allah's mercy is leaping out to you. Look, if there's anyone that wants forgiveness, just Just try.
We read the ayah today.
Come right with
وَرَحْمَتِي وَسِعَتْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ.
Allahu Akbar.
My mercy encompasses everything. Rahmati taghlibu ghadabi.
Yeah.
As is written on the throne of Allah.
On the throne of Allah.
Rahmati sabaqat ghadabi.
Yeah.
Subhanallah.
You know, it's, from an individual perspective, it
Mm.
says it takes a month to get rid of a habit. You have the perfect opportunity to get rid of bad
Uh-huh.
sins in Ramadan now, a month long,
Yeah,
to
definitely.
get rid of bad sins.
Perfect.
Yeah. So going back to that khawf concept. Khawf being when you're on your own. That's when you truly see how much you fear Allah.
That's it.
But how many of us actually get that opportunity to actually connect with your Lord when you're on your own? Because we're so used to being in public eye. Yeah? And the distractions that you have. Even when you're at home, you're not really at home.
Are we really alone though?
That's the point I was going to come to. Even when you're at home, you think you're at home, but you're still in the public eye.
You got your phones.
Yeah.
You're
There's an ayah, it just came to my mind, I thought I'd search it. لِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَخَافُهُ بِالْغَيْبِ. Allah says, لَيَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ اللَّهُ. Allah is going to test us. Right? And He mentions a specific test there. Testing our hands, أَيْدِيكُمْ وَرِمَاحُكُمْ لِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَخَافُهُ بِالْغَيْبِ. Allah wants to know who actually fears Him.
Which
when you're on your
surah is
ones.
that?
That's Surah Ma'idah.
Surah Ma'idah. So we have recited it, yeah?
لا تخفف مريدي كسيدة واسع.
لا يبلونكم الله بشيء من الصيد تنالها أيديكم ورماحكم.
Yes. It has. Yes, we have recited it. SubhanAllah. So it's all about fearing Allah on your own. It's easy to fear Allah in front of public. Telling those people that are going to be sitting in itikaf this year in the masjid amongst 30 other members in the masjid, you can become very religious. But when you're on your own, that's when it really counts.
He says, I'm just reading Baghawi here, Tafsir Baghawi,
Yeah.
and he's talking about this ayah, and he says, وَفَائِدَةُ الْبَلْوَى. Why does Allah actually afflict us with things? What's the benefit of affliction? إِظْهَارُ الْمُطِيعِ مِنَ الْعَاصِي. So Allah can see who's the obedient one, who's the disobedient one. وَإِلَّا فَلَا حَاجَةَ لَهُ إِلَى الْبَلْوَى بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الصَّيْدِ. Because if it hadn't been for that purpose, then there's no need for Allah to afflict us. So the objective of balwa, of any affliction, is that Allah wants to see man yakhafu bil ghaib, who fears Him in seclusion. So it's beautiful.
So the question is how to stay away from friends that you've become really attached with.
And you know
How
they're
to
leading you
refrain
to
from
sin.
them.
Wow, that's interesting. We should open up to the panel.
Yeah.
What do you think?
You guys share your
I think
experience.
so that you should day by day tell them that, or if tell them first that stop it, like stop them, not physically but like with your tongue. If they don't stop, then it's better you just stay away from them, because if you're gonna stay with them, obviously the impact on them is gonna automatically go on you as well.
I've got a question for you, Ustad, relating to this. Do we become salih first or muslih? Meaning, should we rectify ourselves first and then try those around us? Or is trying those around us better?
I think it depends on the position you're in.
So if you're a group leader, for example, you're
Yeah.
part of the crew, you're a major influence, you should...
Depends how much influence you have and what position you're in.
Right.
And depending on that, you'll either have to become a muslih first before becoming the salih himself, or let's say from a youth point of view.
Okay.
Yeah, you need to start with your own sulh.
Okay.
Yeah, you start rectifying your own a'mal, your own actions, and then that influence will slowly play off. And like Shah Sahab in the audience who recited Naat before, he's asking, I mean, you have that crowd around you, those friends that you had made from year 7. Now when you come to year 9, year 10, God forbid, some could be on drugs, some are constantly engaging with the opposite gender. They're up to no good, and by being in their company, you're gonna somehow you will be involved in that. How do you abstain?
What I would say is, although you might not want to leave those friends at that young age, eventually you'll get to the age where you will lose friends anyway. Through worldly matters, not just religious matters. You will lose those people in your life. How many university students do you know that have like more than 30-20 friends? They don't. Yes. Whereas in high school you would have that amount of friends. It's about who you want to be around. So if you can have that mindset from an early age to decide, going into my university life, my adult life, I want to be around the good people. I want to be around the good environment. Then make that early move, make that decision that you want to cut off X, Y, and Z. It might be difficult, but it's going to happen regardless.
I mean, you have to ask yourself, look, who do you prioritize? Do you prioritize your Lord and your relationship with Him, or your relationship with your friends? Yeah, it's one of those difficult decisions you're going to have to make in life, and step away from those friends. And like Shah Sahab, it's a good question. And a lot of if somebody's listening to this right now and he's thinking, okay, you know what, I'm gonna delete all of those friends from my contacts. And when you next go to school and they're like, bro, you're weird, aren't you? You've deleted all the contacts. What's wrong? And then you've got to respond, isn't it? Now the response is probably going to be, you're going to end up lying. I probably lost my phone. I did something, or my sibling deleted all the contacts. And then you'll have to put on a face and keep that relationship going with your friends.
Yeah. I think it's not a realistic approach to just remove everyone. If you look back in history, during the Mongols era, when they came to Iraq, Baghdad, and when Hulaku took over Baghdad, they were still Muslims, even though they were being butchered. They were still Muslims given the Dawah. So if you are in a position where you've fixed those habits that you were indulging in with your friends previously, spread the word, spread the message. That's when your Dawah comes in place. If you're going to the masjid and your friends aren't, leave them. You don't need to block them off on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever. You go to the masjid, you just don't go to where they're calling you, rather than if it's not the masjid. And slowly, if Allah gives them the hadayah, they will start coming masjid with you.
I've got a question
What
for
you
you.
could also do is play their game at their level,
Right.
and beat them at their own game.
How?
Yeah. So if they are, for example, indulging in a particular sin,
Okay.
you beat them at that game, at their game. So understand the logistics of what that sin is, and then give them the pros and cons,
Okay.
and then pull them one by one. Yeah. Because if you try to take on an entire group of friends, it ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
They will dominate straight away. There's no way you stand against them. But my approach would be, if you corner one at a time and start with the easiest target, the one whom you are probably the closest to, the one you can probably have an influence on, shed your influence on him. So that's now out of 10, now you've got 2 on one side. Then build that on 3. But at the same time, keep your effort and your support going. But one thing a lot of people forget, I hold myself accountable in this as well. A lot of times when we do da'wah, we're quick to give da'wah, but how many of us actually make dua for that brother? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's da'wah was always to make da'wah, but then afterwards make dua for them as well.
Dua and Dua.
Yeah, you have to have both. It's easy to say, look, oi, don't commit this sin, alright? Otherwise you're going to get blasted in the fire of hell. Alright, job done. I've come home, he's come home, he's probably moved on with life. But what's probably waiting for him to truly come back to this path is just me raising my hands and making that genuine dua. Ya Rab, give him that guidance. We know so many awliya Allah. Khaja Bayezid Bastami alayhi rahmah, one of my favorite names, biggest names. Yeah, that prostitute woman that came, yeah, and he really just wanted her to make Taubah. She turned up at the door. Now obviously he's a public figure, and if a woman like that knocks on your door and she stood outside and everyone's asking, oops, what's this woman doing here at your house? And he told her, look, let's perform 2 rak'at. And once he got into sajda, he bawled his eyes out crying, Ya Rab, I brought her to the musalla, the rest is up to you now. I've done my bit. So he's done his bit, which is the da'wah bit here, with me on sorry, I'm using as an example. Have it forgive me. Meaning, could be anybody. The brother that I'm trying to give him that advice. I've given him the advice. Now the bit that a lot of times the muslihun are missing out, and these da'wah men, is to go back home and in khalwa, in the privacy, make dua. Because hadith describes, and I remember reciting this in Mishkat al-Masabih, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when you make dua for your Muslim brother in his absence, Allah appoints an angel that very moment who descends from the heavens. He will stand behind you, and once you finish the dua, he will say Ameen. The angel says Ameen to your dua, and then the angel repeats the same dua, Ya Rab, accept this dua from this individual as well for him. So that's how da'wah works.
So you get the dua of the angels by making
You
dua
get
for
the
your
dua of the
fellow
angel. The
Subhanallah.
angel said Ameen to your dua for
Subhanallah.
that brother of yours, and that's how Islah comes.
How
Ustad,
so?
I've got a question
Yeah.
now. It's quite thought provoking now.
So Shahzad, have you done any justice to this? Have you even helped you? If it hasn't even worked,
MashaAllah.
all right.
So my question is, you know, we were talking about fearing Allah in privacy,
Yeah.
right? Could a person who doesn't fear Allah in privacy but does it in public shows, will they always be like that, or would there be a hole in their methodology? I mean, could you filter people and understand that this person doesn't fear Allah in privacy? Do you get what I'm trying to ask? I'm trying to say, let's say a person is not sincere, but he's putting acts of sincerity on
In public.
in public. You think people can see through that? Second to that is, do you think his dawah will be effective? So let's say he's a da'i, he's out on the streets giving dawah, but privately he's a sinner. Will that affect the effectiveness of his dawah?
Of course it is.
And will he be see through to the people? Meaning, can we tell who's fake and who's real? As
See, ultimately, only Allah knows who's real and who's fake. We don't have that power, that lens, to see right through somebody's sincerity. It's never going to
and
happen.
if we know someone's ingenuine in terms of he himself isn't pious, but he's given us pious advice, should it affect our ability to take it or not, or should we always take pious advice no matter who it comes from?
I think you should take it, but Quran does reprimand us in this manner that Surah Saf, لِمَ تَقُولُونَ مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ.
Kabura maqta.
Yeah. Why are you advising people? لِمَ تَقُولُونَ مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ. You don't do it yourself, but you're telling others. So if you read the tafsir of that, the ulama describe that even if you're not implementing it, still you can give that advice. It could benefit anybody, and that in the long run does have an effect on you. Yeah, a lot of young imams that are coming through the education system now, and they sat on the minbar and mihrab. We're not saying they're all angels. They probably, many imams that we just mentioned before that have been caught on social media getting up to no good. They're imams. They have the knowledge, but in their amal they're weak. But they do still have an effect. If, let's say, I'm not practicing, but through my advice, a sister puts a hijab on, a brother starts to perform salah, I get the reward for their good deeds.
Oh.
And after a while, as that goodness is accumulating in my records,
It will affect you.
it has an impact.
Subhanallah.
It takes time, but it will have an impact. And we know so many of them which after a few years of trial and error experience, one day it does knock on your door of the heart. And you do that one night, you'll probably be lying there thinking, you know what, I'm preaching all of this. How much of it am I doing it myself? And when you have that moment, that lone moment, that's what I was trying to get to. What is true khawf? Khawf is that one moment in your life where it's, that bulb moment. Light bulb moment. Bling.
The realization.
That realization.
The click.
And you wake up, that click. And then after that, you'll never be doing that sin again. That's all it takes.
I think I heard Habib Umar, Hafidhullah, one of the greats of our
Subhanallah.
times, he was talking about that actually. And he was saying that moment can happen at any time.
Anytime.
And he said you shouldn't judge anybody, because the biggest sin in the world could go sleep tonight but wake up tomorrow biggest wali of Allah. Because don't judge anybody at all. It could happen at any moment. And you would be more sinful for that person. He's done his tawbah now.
Yeah.
يُبَدِّلُ اللَّهُ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ حَسَنَاتٍ. He's perfect. But you're still you. So don't judge anybody.
Yeah,
MashaAllah.
go on. Ahmad, you were going to say something?
So I was gonna say, if you would like to elaborate, summarize the procedure for dawah in this modern day and age. I understand it might be different to the traditional method,
See, I
because
think
dawah could be through your actions, through how you behave,
depends who
inspiring others.
you're addressing, isn't it?
For the youngsters,
I mean,
I'm
If-
sure you know how to give dawah anyway, but for the youngsters that don't.
I'm not a da'i by the way, I tell you that.
I think the best way of dawah is work on yourself. It has an impact. People see you becoming a better person, automatically they're intrigued. Why is he so good?
Yeah.
Maybe I should try it. So it'll always work.
And like how you said on
Isn't
the
it?
first day, even if you're an atheist, if you were to follow the life style described by religion, you would ultimately
You're gonna have a good
leave
life, bro.
Good life. You would have a
Yeah,
life
someone
full of
asked me, he said,
morals,
what if it's all
ethics.
fake? And I said, but
You
at
have
the end of the day, I had a
full
good
of
life.
positivity,
I had a
isn't
good
it?
life. Left a good legacy. People will say he was a good guy. And it's true for us
And
anyway,
it's
so it's
by
only
his
going to get
others,
better.
See, I mean, if from a different angle, if I were to discuss, every person gives off an energy, doesn't he?
Subhanallah.
Yeah, there are studies, scientific studies on energy and how you give off energy.
Auras and all
Yeah,
that.
auras. Yeah, a religious individual naturally has that awe. He gives off that vibe.
Wow.
People around him feel religious, and you know from the descriptions of the awliya Allah, yeah, that when you look at them, how the words of the hadith that when you view them, when
You're reminded of Allah.
they
isn't it?
remind you of Allah,
Of
doesn't
Allah,
it?
yeah.
Yeah. That reminder is that awe that they
Wow.
give off.
So,
Where is that coming from? That's coming from that positive energy, that nur within. It gives off that vibe.
I
And
think that's
people who are, I'm gonna speak a bit sciencey again, that are conducting to them,
yeah.
they do feel that impact, doesn't it? Oh, yeah, mention
Sense
that.
it. I mean, I think that's a beautiful advice for a lot of the youngsters who are somewhat religious or interested in religion. Is go out there, find these awliya Allah who are in your locality, and there's definitely awliya Allah everybody,
There are.
and have that glance, have that sohbat. That's what will change you.
I mean,
Ittaqullaha wa kunu ma
Masadiqeen. And this is why traditionally, ulama, after studying the outer sciences, they would then go on a search for the inner sciences. After having done 17, 20 years of studies in the madaris, they will then go out and seek sohbah of the awliya.
This is the Musawi way, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
Musa alayhi salam and the story of Al-Khadir.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it's about. The meeting of the two seas in the tafsir of that, they say it's where the outer and the inner sciences meet each other.
Yeah,
That's where you find completion. Majma al-Bahrain. She's also a fiqh book as well.
Yeah.
It's almost like as it gets to a point where it's not like studying to a point. It becomes a question of how far can you go
Yeah.
to find out what's not been found out yet.
You can never stop, because the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Exactly.
You've learned a bab of knowledge, but that bab leads to 10 more babs of knowledge. So you're always wild. So it's a beautiful journey.
You asked before as well, I mean, how do you give advice to youngsters? I mean, I personally, maybe this is just me, I may be wrong, and do correct me. The way we are doing Islah of the community now, I think it's changing per generation. The way we do the da'wah. Traditionally, we come from the subcontinent. Da'wah back home is very different to the way we do da'wah here. Some of the subjects we were discussing yesterday, hormonal changes, puberty, and adult content. All that, you could never discuss this even today if you go back to the subcontinent.
Yeah.
On a pulpit or even in a masjid. It's such a taboo subject, it's not seen anywhere. But over here we have the confidence to discuss these subjects, like even on a public platform like this. It is changing. So
but that's wrong though there as well, because it's not like
they've been
that stuff
deprived, isn't
doesn't
it?
it's
They've
not
been
like that
deprived.
stuff doesn't happen there though.
it's obviously is happening.
Yeah. So it's something that they could do there as well then.
And advice, I mean, how do we capture these young ones? And this is what I want. I had this, like Khalid's Bhai has everything up his sleeve, yeah? I had this one up my sleeve as well for as a subject, but this is for tomorrow, as in particularly the youth and the role of the masajid to do with the youth, and in terms of capturing their minds and souls back to the masjid. Times have changed. We're having to go the extra mile. We're having to go to those extremes which have never been done before.
Yeah, definitely.
The traditional ulama would never take on this methodology. But if this is the only way, then I personally believe we have to improvise. Even if it means at times I feel like I'm putting my own, because look, I'm kind of traditionally schooled, okay? So I have that traditional background.
You look traditional.
Alhamdulillah. And a modern touch to, well, I try to make a modern touch in the way I deliver to the community. But so like I was saying, being a bit traditionalist, at times it feels like I'm putting my own honor and dignity online, on the line, just to get the message across to the youth. Otherwise, I would never need to speak on these subjects.
It has to be done.
Somebody's got to do it.
Well, that's wisdom, isn't it? It's like حدث الناس على قدر عقولهم.
Yeah.
So that's all you're doing. You're keeping
تكلموا
on the
على
time.
قدر عقولهم. Speak to them at their level of understanding.
There's a quote that when Instagram first opened, I joined straight away. So I was from the early members.
Aye.
And one of the first quotes I
still
put,
have never had one.
it
Not
came
like
to my
1
mind.
gram is like which 1 gram is 1
The-
gram of
oh,
what?
yeah, for the gram. There's one quote I put right. This is going back years now when it first came out. It just flashed right in front of my eyes. It said, "Mosques shouldn't be, mosques should be hospitals for the spiritually ill, not clubs for the elders or the spiritually rich." I mean, it's become a club now for the people where they've got it and they can go there and they can have more of it. But what about those people who really need it? So I think that's
Something we need to look into
Mhm.
from tomorrow. And tomorrow, inshallah, we'll have a
panel.
maybe a smaller panel, but a live audience.
Mashallah.
Large
audience.
I'm also thinking maybe like get a little method going in it.
Inshallah.
You guys on it?
Yeah.
Yeah, why not? You should do a one.
Take
one
the
time
audience
with
Make
Make
sure
sure you
that's what
put
I
your
said.
religious caps on like this one.
Yeah.
Take like this one.
Inshallah.
Not that one. Not that one. Take it. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa
Wa
rahmatullahi wa
alaikum
barakatuh.